Allow me to present a simple yet deeply significant inquiry. When was the most recent occasion you genuinely experienced your birthday? Not simply recognized it superficially, not just acknowledged the well-wishers, but authentically felt it the way you once did during childhood. Recall when your pulse would quicken with eager anticipation upon seeing festive decorations, sweet treats, and having everyone's focus directed toward you for one brief, meaningful day. Now think about your adult years. That identical date comes and passes, yet it feels indistinguishable from any other day. You rise from bed, perhaps notice a few digital greetings, maybe your parent contacts you, then you proceed with your routine. You mention to others you don't truly commemorate it. You assert it holds no significance. You declare it's simply an ordinary day. But does that reflect reality? Because hidden beneath that seeming disinterest, beneath that effortless dismissal, there frequently exists a silent tale. Those who regard their birthday as unremarkable aren't emotionally cold, without feeling or disengaged. In truth, they're often the most thoughtful individuals. Those who've mastered hiding their hopes because letdown has been their instructor. From a mental health standpoint, birthdays serve as emotional reflections. They reveal your sentiments about being alive, your connection to recognition, and your ease with being observed. When someone states, "My birthday holds no importance," they're frequently communicating, "I no longer seek external approval." But sometimes what they're actually saying is, "I've abandoned expecting it." A distinction exists between growing up and emotional disconnection, and birthdays possess an unusual capacity to illuminate which path we've chosen. Certain people authentically move beyond birthday anticipation, not through melancholy, but through inner calm. They've located meaning in everyday moments, in familiar rhythms, in tranquil experiences. For them, delight isn't limited to a date marked on paper. They've understood that life itself represents the occasion. But for others, the account varies. For them, birthdays are silently intricate. They might trigger mild unease not about aging, but about past experiences. Perhaps birthdays evoke moments when they felt disregarded. Or perhaps they previously invested too much emotionally and suffered from unmet hopes. So instead of voicing this year, "I hope others acknowledge me," they announce it's simply another day. It's defense masquerading as disinterest. And here's where the mental aspect becomes fascinating because it shows us how our minds evolve. When we face recurring emotional frustrations, our brain starts reducing expectations. Psychologists term this emotional self-defense. You lessen hopes to sidestep letdown. You condition yourself against hoping too vigorously. And although that might appear sorrowful, it's genuinely a form of emotional capability, a technique for sustaining balance. Our mind values consistency over thrills when thrills have repeatedly led to suffering. But here's the surprising element. Eventually, that identical self-defense can imperceptibly reduce joy. The heart that previously protected itself grows overly cautious. You start navigating your own life like an observer at another's event. Polite, attentive, yet removed. Think about how many people express with a smile, "Oh, I don't truly mark birthdays." But afterward, they silently reconsider the day mentally, taking note of who didn't communicate, who failed to remember, who stayed quiet. Everyone does this. Even those claiming they're unaffected because being affected is fundamentally human. Even feigning indifference represents a type of caring, simply reversed, compressed, buried under a facade of composure. Mental health professionals identify this as avoidant acknowledgement patterns. It's when you convince yourself acknowledgement is unnecessary because part of you worries about not obtaining it. And it commonly emerges in people who previously discovered that emotional wants were burdensome, that it was easier to want nothing than experience repeated letdowns. So, when you meet someone who regards their birthday as just another day, don't presume they're emotionally removed. Sometimes they've just found peace with disappointment. They've substituted enthusiasm for predictability. But predictability has consequences. Because under the tranquil surface of, "It's just another day," resides an emotional truth. Everyone wants to be perceived. Not commended, not celebrated through grand displays, but authentically seen. There's something profoundly meaningful about birthdays. They signify existence itself. The one annual day that's entirely yours. Not for your achievements, not for your companions, but purely because you're here. And for countless people, that realization triggers mixed feelings. Some feel thankfulness, others feel solitude. Some feel both together, like a peculiar blend of reminiscence and neutrality. It's because birthdays, consciously or not, make us think about time. They make us consider how far we've traveled and how far we haven't. That's the hidden mental trigger most people miss. For some, regarding their birthday as typical is their approach to staying emotionally stable. It's their strategy for keeping time from feeling too overwhelming. If I don't emphasize it, they reason, then it won't seem like another year vanishing. There's also something cultural in this evolution. During childhood, birthdays are communal markers. They tie us to community. But during adulthood, that attention often feels peculiar. Many grown individuals silently struggle with the contradiction between wanting recognition and wanting to seem self-reliant. And that inner struggle appears subtly in their approach to their own birthday. Because here's what transpires underneath. When you develop as the reliable person, the sturdy one, or the caretaker, your mind absorbs a lesson. Your contentment is secondary. You master minimizing your wants. You transform into the person who notes others' days but neglects your own. And gradually, your birthday starts seeming unimportant. You're uncertain what you'd even do if someone arranged something grand. It seems uncomfortable, possibly even pointless. But the fact is that unease with being honored isn't humbleness. It's emotional weariness. Within, many of these people still long to feel seen, but not conspicuously. They don't want the spotlight. They want comprehension. They want someone to recall not just their date of birth, but who they've evolved into throughout the year. Because here's the paradox of emotional growth. The more emotionally independent you grow, the harder it becomes to accept love without doubt. So birthdays transform into neutral spaces, locations where openness would normally emerge, but gets substituted with functionality. It's fine, you say. Let's just move through the day. But behind that composed manner, the mind is handling multiple emotions. Longing for youthful enthusiasm, mild melancholy about faded relationships, thankfulness for persisting, and a tender yearning for ease, for the type of joy that once appeared naturally. That's what makes this mental pattern so widespread. Even if you think you've matured past birthdays, a piece of you still remembers what it was like to be honored without reservation. There's also a dimension of philosophical reflection that mental health experts have noticed in grown individuals around their birthdays. Something called temporal self-perception. It's the instant you review the person you were 12 months prior and silently evaluate the distance between who you hope to be and who you currently are. And sometimes that distance is troubling. That's why for certain people birthdays seem like reflections, not festivities. They emphasize the unspoken gap between hope and reality. And instead of facing that image, people choose to diminish the day completely. But it's not disinterest. It's self-examination. It's the human consciousness stating, allow me room to understand my own journey. So if you've ever felt peculiar about your birthday, like you're meant to experience something you don't, know that it's typical. You're not unappreciative or removed. You're simply conscious. You're conscious that time is progressing. You're conscious that affirmation seems different currently. You're conscious that commemoration represents something more substantial than sweets and flames. Because birthdays are never truly about years lived. They're about purpose. And as we age, the more individual that purpose grows. When you were little, your birthday concerned the world seeing you. When you're mature, it concerns you seeing yourself. It's less about materials and more about being present. Less about who shows up and more about how present you've been in your own life. That's the understated shift most don't mention. And yet it clarifies everything about why we stop emphasizing it. Because perhaps we've stopped seeking the world's acclaim and started seeking harmony with our own path. But even in that harmony, there's a whisper, a soft voice stating, I hope someone still thinks of me. That's the paradox of emotional growth. You can feel satisfied yet still want connection. You can feel stable yet still long for the excitement of being noticed. And that's fine. That's being human. Because regarding your birthday as typical doesn't mean you're emotionally frozen. It means you've discovered that joy isn't something to plan. It's something you hold silently each day in the modest ways you keep being present for yourself. It's the most delicate form of celebration, unseen but authentic. But here's where it gets more captivating. The profound dimension most never grasp. When someone regards their birthday as typical, they're not dismissing joy. They're reimagining it. They're stating, I no longer need outside permission to feel good about existing. And that shift from outside celebration to inner recognition represents one of the most subtle forms of growing up. Because somewhere in the journey, we all start discovering that the elements which previously made us feel valued, presents, events, announcements, start losing their appeal. What starts mattering more is harmony. Did I live this year truthfully? Did I evolve? Did I show up when necessary? For many people, a birthday shifts from being about activity to being about reflection. It's not that they're unconcerned. It's that their concept of celebration has shifted. Maybe their celebration now means taking a lone walk, making their preferred dish, or taking a calm day away to contemplate. It's not the boisterous joy of decorations. It's the quiet joy of being alone. And that's something society often gets wrong. We mistake quiet for hollow, but quietness can be meaningful. In psychology, this relates to something termed self-determined motivation. When your principles and your behaviors start matching, you feel a richer sense of satisfaction, even without outside acknowledgement. So when someone observes their birthday peacefully, it's not disinterest, it's harmony. They're no longer chasing the type of celebration that's noisy, temporary, and showy. They've substituted it with something constant, self-reliance. But still there's an emotional current flowing underneath that peace. Because while certain people genuinely feel satisfied observing their birthday as typical, others silently wish they weren't forced to. They wish another person would make the effort. They wish they didn't need to act like it's insignificant. And that conflict between wanting recognition and wanting to appear untroubled is among the most human contradictions possible. We all carry it. The wish to be noticed without requesting it. The longing to be honored without claiming space for it. It's that common tension between self-sufficiency and closeness. Psychologically, this relates to something termed developed secure bonding. When people have gone through emotional setbacks, perhaps maturing in settings where care was unreliable or restricted, they master depending on themselves. But even independent people maintain a quiet wish that someone will see past the barriers. So, a birthday transforms into a subtle evaluation. Not one you declare, but one your consciousness silently tracks. Who thought of me? Who contacted without being reminded? Who still sees me when I'm not in view? And even if you convince yourself it's unimportant, a minor part of you still monitors. That's not fragility, that's humanity. Because no matter how self-knowing or emotionally self-sufficient we grow, we never move past the requirement for connection. We just get more skilled at hiding it. There's also an interesting paradox in how people perceive time on their birthdays. For some, it represents forward movement. For others, weight. And our brain handles that weight uniquely based on your emotional past. If your recent years have been rewarding, birthdays represent achievements. But if the past year has been difficult or unclear, a birthday can represent a quiet confrontation with yourself. A reminder that another year has elapsed and the uncertainties you haven't resolved remain. That's why many people choose to merge the day into the rest of their week. It's not avoidance, it's self-defense. It's stating, I'll contemplate when I'm ready. But even in that silence, the day holds significance. It awakens recollection, appreciation, disappointment, longing all together. It's as if your unconscious reviews everything that's evolved and everything that's stayed the same. And in that inner conversation, something meaningful happens. You understand that birthdays, removed of all custom and expectation, are genuinely consciousness checkpoints. They make you stop even briefly and wonder, am I living truthfully? Am I still growing into someone I know? Do I value the story I'm creating with my life? When you regard your birthday as typical, it doesn't mean you're sidestepping those inquiries. It might genuinely mean you're addressing them silently, personally, without observers. Because not all growth requires broadcasting. Some growth is hidden. It's in how you respond uniquely than before. It's in how you pardon quicker, protest less, or notice beauty in instances that previously escaped attention. And maybe that's the most genuine form of celebration. When you don't require the day to seem remarkable, because you've mastered finding the remarkable inside the mundane. Yet, there's a kind truth deserving recognition. Even the most independent spirits still merit feeling valued sometimes. Not because they require approval, but because acknowledgement feeds the aspects of us that carry others. Those who regard their birthdays as unremarkable are frequently the identical people who create space for everyone else's achievements. They're the silent foundations in their groups, those who note your significant dates, who reach out to you first, who contribute without tracking. And occasionally those people forget that they too merit brightness. That it's fine to permit others to return the favor, that you don't need to deserve joy by staying strong constantly. Because even the most composed spirits still require warmth. Even the self-reliant hearts still require being seen. Not for their actions, but for their being. There's nothing incorrect about desiring that. There's nothing feeble about feeling its absence. If you've ever experienced that silent longing on your birthday, the type that doesn't seek attention, but still resonates within your chest, that's your heart reminding you that connection remains important. It's reminding you that you're human, and that's the complete meaning of the day. It's not to honor flawlessness or accomplishment. It's to honor the reality that you're still present, still discovering, still changing, still working to understand what it means to be alive. So maybe the psychology of people who regard their birthday as unremarkable isn't about uncaring at all. Maybe it's about wholeness, the combination of joy and contemplation, the understanding that not every feeling must be vocal to be real. And yet, even in that tranquility, there's room for modest gestures. Because one text can still brighten someone's day, one voice message, one conversation, one instant of attention. We fail to recognize how much those small acknowledgments mean to someone who states, "It's just another day." For them, it's not about the scale of the occasion. It's about genuineness. It's about being reminded that their quiet life still creates ripples, still registers with someone. And maybe that's the true psychology of everything. That underneath, none of us genuinely want to be overlooked. We just want to be valued in the manner we comprehend. Some people want spectacle, others just want tranquility. Some people want the unexpected, others want reliability. Some people want gatherings, others want one person who pays attention. And that's fine. There's no single way to live your own life. So if your birthday seems unremarkable, if you attended work, prepared your beverage, reviewed your notifications, and moved forward, maybe that's not something requiring repair. Maybe it's something worth respecting. Because what you're genuinely communicating is, my life is already sufficiently complete to not need one day to give it meaning. That's not disconnection. That's appreciation disguised. But at the same time, permit yourself gentleness. If you long for the anticipation you previously had, it's fine to experience that too. Longing for your previous self doesn't indicate you've moved backward. It indicates you're recalling what purity felt like before reality taught you caution. And maybe that's the finest gift you can grant yourself on your birthday. To recall the youngster who previously tallied down to midnight with bright eyes, who trusted that one day could contain boundless wonder. Because that youngster is still somewhere inside you, hoping not for a party, but for recognition, hoping for you to murmur, "Hey, I notice you. We survived another year." That's the type of celebration that doesn't vanish when the flames go out. That's the type that stays. So, if your birthday ever seems like just another day, don't experience guilt about it. It's not void, it's transformation. It's the mind discovering that meaning doesn't require noise. And yet, in the silence, if someone thinks of you, permit them. Permit them to speak your name. Permit them to remind you that you're significant. Because you are. Even on days that seem unremarkable. Even when you regard your birthday as typical, particularly then. Because maybe that's the most wonderful part of maturing. Discovering that celebration doesn't always require streamers. Sometimes it just requires consciousness. An instant of calm. A full breath. You don't need to express a desire. You already represent one, a living extension of every form of yourself that reached this point. and that deserves celebrating silently or not every single year.